Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Chris Before Coffee. Today, we're going to be talking about the riots in Missouri and a lot of the very peaceful protests. We're going to be talking about JP Morgan's patent application, just for the lols, and we're going to be talking about the dramatic price drop in Litecoin since Max Kaiser's initial price target that he did back in November last year. So to start today, I thought I'd go straight to the Missouri story just because it's a little bit close to home for some of our guests here. I'm joined today by Theo and Nick. Say hi, guys.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Theo. So let's talk about what's been going on, because a lot of what I've been seeing on the news with what's been going on in Missouri reminds me a lot of the riots that we had in London back in 2011. And one of the things that really stuck out for me was the way that the protesters and a lot of the more violent rioters often go straight for the commercial areas, right? They go straight to the marketplace to express their ire. And is there anything that we can read into that?
Well, maybe I'm not 100% sure, but I've been told from people who are in the area that a lot of these rioters and looters aren't actually from the community that is protesting the local sheriffs and cops. These are people who came from other parts of St. Louis to join in on, I guess I would say, fun, and have just been making it probably worse for the people trying to peacefully, get justice for the guy in the street. And there's the whole thing with as well. Like if you look at I've heard comparisons to the Boston Tea Party. Oh, they're destroying goods to show an example. But stealing electronic tracking devices like the cell phone store that was broken into, that is not a very smart revolutionary idea. That's putting a tracking device on your person that they know was stolen because they can look at their inventory logs and what was missing. Then you have the fact that people were stealing without putting masks on, etc., etc. But I don't know why they do it. Honestly, I don't think it's very smart. I think that they would be better focusing just on the police. But what are you gonna do? If some people get emotional and they want to break shit.
I think that you can't. People know you can't just go up, or they don't think they can go up to the police station and just attack the police. Everyone knows that's a military force that occupies the neighborhood. So you're not going to just go right up to the police. People aren't totally stupid, and normally shops are defended by the police pretty well, but at this time they weren't. They weren't protected. So I think that people take out a lot of frustration on some of the shops sometimes. If it's a good tactic, if it's right or wrong, we could talk about that. But I think that it's a target because people are in economic. It's related to economics. Where people are at their last straw, and one guy said that. They live with the threat of death all the time, but the shops and the shop owners don't. They don't realize what's going on in their neighborhood. So I think that's the dimension that all this is happening in, that the people going to the shop buying stuff are living under the daily threat of death, and they know that can happen. This is just an example. And the guy is saying, okay, but the shops and the shop owners are basically protected by the police. So they see it as those are kind of two sides, I think. That's the best that I could understand from what I heard from the interviews. And, we also need to put this in a perspective. This is not an isolated incident. We need to put this in a big perspective in America about, like I was saying before the show, I mean, you're much more likely to be killed by a police officer than you are a terrorist in America by a far margin. And America has a long history of police killing people where it's not justified, and it's clearly not justified. You can go back to 1999. There was the Diallo case. This is a immigrant in New York, and he was shot 43 times, and he turned out to be or 41 times, I think, and he was unarmed. You can also even go back to 1985, where the MOVE organization in Philadelphia was the police dropped a bomb on top of their house. So this is the police using military tactics within the United States borders. So America, it's not a new thing that police kill people. So people are already on edge depending on where you live. So these kind of explosions of frustration happen, and sometimes they're not always logical in the turnout, as you mentioned, with stealing cell phones that can easily be tracked.
And one of the other things that I think what you're alluding to is what we discussed in one of our earlier shows about the personhood of the corporation. It's fine for Starbucks because Starbucks as a legal entity exists somewhere else. They don't exist in the locality. They exist in their head office, which could be in Luxembourg. It could be in one of these, tax havens. And we don't have access to the same loopholes that they do. So what they're able to do is they're able to externalize risk. And we often don't relate things like prejudice and racial discrimination, which can often be revealed in the moment of decision making when a police officer has to decide whether or not that person is armed. And in the case of Michael Brown, of course he wasn't. But what does it say about the prejudices of the police officer where he was forced to reveal his true beliefs in that split-second judgment? Right? He was tested. And actually in social psychology, there have been numerous tests to detect whether or not there is some underlying prejudicial beliefs in a police officer, because there have been computer games that have been designed where people take these computer games and they're given split-second windows to decide whether someone is a civilian or a criminal. And they've got a gun and they're pointing the gun and they've got to decide. And graphics that depict people with darker colored skin tend to get shot the most, right, even though they're actually civilians. And what this does is it forces people to give themselves up. It forces people to display what's called an honest signal in behavioral economics. They're like blushing. You've got no choice but to reveal the truth about how you really feel deep down. And then when this truth kind of comes out, this externalization of risk that these big corporate structures, these outsourced tyrannies, what they do is they lock in the profits for themselves, they go fly and live in Ecuador or somewhere, or Switzerland, and then they leave the mess for everybody else. And then I think the only way that people can really do anything about it, the only way they can claim some kind of control over this environment is to lash out, no?
Yeah, I like that word, outsourced tyranny. That's a real good. I think that pretty much explains it, and that's how a lot of people are seeing it that live there, I think. As a kind of out, and that they don't have to deal with the mess that they're partially responsible for.
And let's just probably look at who's paying the majority of the taxes for these police officers. I mean, no one really pays taxes. Taxes are fucking taken from you, right? And you're forced to pay for this police force. And let's be honest, in a low-income area, it's going to be businesses and maybe outside forces paying for this police force. So the police force has little to no obligation to the local people. There's a big disconnect there, as you're saying, with like the corporate tyranny and whatnot, and how the police force interacts with the local communities. You see it all over. Everywhere there's low-income areas, the police tend to give very little shits about the people that they're supposed to, I shouldn't say supposed, the people that they claim to be protecting or they claim to be, serving. That's not, like I said, there's no such thing as protect and serve. That's all bullshit. That's a marketing slogan on the side of a car. All right, that's not a real thing.
That's the branding. That's the branding. And let's talk about the uniform. If you work for Starbucks, you have to wear a uniform. But we are Satoshi on Twitter, who's one of my favorite followers, has said the U.S. Army issued desert boots. If it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, they're soldiers. And it's a good point. This was the picture we were talking about earlier. This looks exactly like a police state.
Yep, it does. I think that it's even there's even more dimensions to it, because we don't know. They haven't announced who the policeman is. Maybe they say to protect him, but I mean, I don't want to. I know sometimes I talk about conspiracy theories, but I wouldn't be surprised if the soldier might have been ex-military or had some other issues, and they didn't already You know, it would be really interesting to see this guy's record, what he's already been, his discipline record at the police, and have they already seen some problems with this guy or not? If this guy has a record of so-called police brutality, or has he killed other people, or how many times has he, deployed his deadly weapon, or how many times has he deployed a non-deadly weapon? How many times has he not followed weapon protocol? I think that's another. They say they don't want to have his name released, probably to protect him. But one big reason they don't want his name to be released is they don't want people to do research on this guy, because they're probably covering their own asses.
Yeah, they want to cover their bases. They need to protect their state agents, because a state agent can't be responsible for what they do. That would diminish the entire collectivism behind the state.
And of course, I was just going to remind everyone, Theo, that people can have their say in the Q&A, bottom left-hand corner. Tell us what you think. Go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to say that there's also another dimension that what's happening also is that because the USA has such a big military presence and military involvement worldwide, that there's a lot of leftover military equipment, and it's been documented that some of this equipment is finding its way in police departments. So not only is this not just uniforms, as you said, it looks like a military uniform. It is an occupying military force. Well, they're even sometimes using armored jeeps and armored, vehicles that were used from the military that the military doesn't need anymore. It's not good enough for the military, and now they're being sourced to local police departments. And the same thing partially for some ex-soldiers. Now, some of the soldiers have the problem that once you get trained as a warrior, it's really hard to integrate back into society, because you've got this kind of mental mode of destruction and killing people. And what are you going to do? And sometimes they're accepted on police departments, but they might just flip and go into warrior mode where it's a war zone, and then it could be that they kind of have a reflex where they kind of, act like they're in a war zone and just start killing people. I mean, I don't know if that's what happened, but it's an ongoing topic that needs to be talked about, because even if these guys are fed up with the military, sometimes one of the only jobs they can get is in the security or the military profession, and then they're not always suitable to be in that profession anymore due to all of the mental distress and possibly physical brain damage that's been done to them that we don't know about, and more are going to come back. And so it's a really difficult situation that nobody is really talking about, and we don't have any clear numbers about what this all means. So this is another aspect of the militarization of the police force in America that needs to be talked about also. It's related to the military involvement worldwide.
Well, let's relate this. Let's go to the philosophy now. I want to relate this to the JP Morgan patent application. And just before you call me mad and you tell me that I'm being too abstract, hear me out, right? So this is what's known as an embodiment of an invention. That's the technical term, I believe, that is used in patent applications. And this is a schematic of the application by JP Morgan to do a peer-to-peer payment network. It's quite an old application, but I think they've refiled it recently, and yet again it's been turned down. I don't want to focus on the sort of news element of this. What I want to demonstrate, I want to give you a juxtaposition right now of this patent application by JP Morgan and this diagram by Satoshi Nakamoto. Which one of these looks more elegant? Which one of these looks more Occam razor-like? So let me tell you why JP Morgan have just excelled in the art of not getting it. This is their patent application, which is just full of pseudo-jargon. I've read it. It's just a bunch of nonsense. And I can direct you quite specifically to areas of interest. Let me just go through my notes. So you're going to want to start looking at sections 8 18 through to 25, 26. And here's the giveaway. Here's where they really kind of give themselves up. Here's the honest signal, similar to the one the police officer showed. So what they've done is they've substituted certain ideas in Bitcoin, I think, with their own ideas, and particularly this EFT, this network, which is basically like a blockchain, which stores a record of peers and transactions and so on. And what this EFT payment network does is it provides the merchant with a powerful data mining, customer service, and order fulfillment tools at their fingertips. So this is about the control of information. And then further down, you've got some more stuff going on in sections, I believe, let me just check, it's about 47. They talk about, in section 47, they talk about thin wallet technology, whatever the hell that is. They don't really go into an awful lot of detail of how this stuff works.
Is that like an SPV wallet or whatever?
Right, well, you know, who knows what they're thinking. What they're thinking is this is going to work in a browser, and it's going to be push-based payment where, you know, I'm going to be able to pay anyone without necessarily having an account tied to my legal identity, although legal identity is very much involved here. But what they mean is that I'll just be able to pay someone with my mobile by bumping it up against the other person's mobile. Now, let me tell you where I'm trying to come from on this. The way Satoshi solved this problem was not by coming up with the answers and the great technological innovation. He did it by asking the right question. He did it by re-understanding an old problem in a new way. And it really comes down to this last section here. And for anyone who's been following me for some time, you'll probably have heard this before, but please, for the benefit, please forgive me. Let me try and go through this one more time for those who haven't heard it, okay? So the task was, how do we translate cash in our physical world into the virtual world, right, where we've done it before with, you know, Facebook and the yearbook and MySpace with the mixtape and so on. And the task he identified is that messages need to be broadcast on a best effort basis where peers can leave and join the network at will, and that they know that the network will behave as expected whilst they're looking the other way. But this is because everybody has discretionary attention, and we can't be spending our whole time watching the watchers, making sure that they're doing their job properly. When I look away, let's say I see somebody drawing a painting and I see them at the beginning of the day, and then I come back at the end of the day and I see the result. What I miss out on is the sequence, right? And that gives frauds opportunities to reorder the sequence of activities whilst you were looking the other way, to paint a very different picture, to give you an illusion of what was there before. And what that subjects you to is this Schrodinger-like condition where every time you go to your bank account to withdraw money, you're taking a chance on whether or not you can actually withdraw those funds. You're looking at pixels on a screen that give you, supposedly giving you information about the money in your account, but actually it may not exist. And if everyone turned up tomorrow and applied their attention to those numbers, the money wouldn't be there. Now, the way he solves this is twofold. Satoshi understands scarcity in terms of accountability and traceability. Right? In order for the state, in order for the numbers on the ledger to transition into new ownership, in order for you to reassign the ownership of the coins, there have to be an uninterrupted chain of digital signatures. Look at how elegant this description is. In order to transition the state, you have to say your name. The name is the signature, right? You have to say your name the only way that you can, because you are proving that you are the owner of those coins, both by your unique ability to present a signature that was made by your private key and it can't have been made by anyone else's, and also by the existing state of the system. This is beautifully elegant. It's something called a timestamp server, okay? And it has the ability to prove that actions take place at a distance in a particular sequence, such that you can leave the network, come back to the network, and you know that it's been behaving properly whilst you were gone. And then, of course, he goes into the proof of work, and then, as alluded to in the title of today's show, honesty has to pay more than fraud. What you have to do, one way that we expand and one way that we can grow, that we've realized over the last 2,500 years, is with the profit motive. Profit motives work really well to move people into action, because if I'm moved by intrinsic motivators, like a belief that I want to live in a clean environment, sometimes I can feel conflicted, and that belief doesn't always translate into actions that result in me actually cleaning my house. But if I'm motivated by profit, Satoshi is going to make a claim something like, I'm always going to want to seek profit if given the choice, because profit would give me the ability to make a decision again in the future. It gives me the freedom of opportunity later. So that even if I can't really decide on what intrinsically motivates me in this moment, I can at least fall back on the idea that I can do it again, that I can have this opportunity to make a decision again. This is very elegant. It's very Occam's razor. It's just very well thought out as compared to something like this. And what it all boils down to, I think, is control. What the patent doesn't say anywhere in here is who controls the EFT. And if someone wants to correct me, please do. Bottom hand corner Q&A. Please tell me if I'm missing something. But they go on and on about virtual private lockboxes and, peer-to-peer, and how this is, the new thing, and how it's the trend that people are paying for things using credit cards. This EFT system, at no point do they actually say, and by the way, we control the network. We're the ones that are processing the payment. You see, the problem is we exist in a closed-loop environment called Earth. It has the sun, which comes from outside, but we live in a stateful universe. The universe remembers the positions of particles everywhere. And if something happens in the world and it isn't accurately translated on our ledgers, which are also stateful systems because they track the order of payments, and we start rubbing things out and we start forgetting that certain things happened, our ledgers end up being very much out of harmony with the state of nature. We end up thinking we've got more things at our disposal than we actually have. So fundamentally, the way I'm relating this is with control. These people just want control. This is like Bitcoin, except they're the only miner on the network.
So they're what? It's a Ripple knockoff almost, or?
I think this actually predates Ripple originally. So I think this application is quite old. I think so.
It said November, right? I thought it said November 2013.
Yeah, but this is a refiling.
Yeah, you're right. It is a refiling.
From 1999, from May 3rd, 1999.
Yeah, you're right. I see it right there.
But they keep refiling this thing, and it keeps getting up. I mean, first of all, there's nothing in there that really says how it works. You've basically just got a glorified flowchart. It doesn't actually say. It doesn't give me any code. It doesn't tell me what's actually going on under the hood.
Yeah, and you're right, it doesn't. I'm just like kind of skimming through it. I wonder what they were thinking. Like, I don't even, personally, I don't like software patents. I think they're kind of dumb to begin with. I mean, it's like, I repeated the same sentence you said. You know what I mean? I don't understand the logic in software patents. I understand, like, the business, like, wants to make money off it and sue motherfuckers for using their same code, but if somebody's already created an open source version, I guess they're screwed, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the idea would be that they would stop the use of it, or that it would basically mean that you'd have to pay a license in order to use it.
But that only works in the United States or places where J.P. Morgan or whatever has the permission to pull that off.
This is the irony of government and states, nation states, is they end up distorting what should be a free market, because we can't transact honestly anymore, because what companies will do is they will play states off of each other. They'll play jurisdictional arbitrage. Here's another area where they give away, did I read this one out already? One essential feature of the present invention, completely contrary to the prior art, is that payments made from the IPA account are transmitted to the payee as credit over the secure EFT network. Okay, that gives me nothing. That tells me nothing. I've learned nothing by reading that sentence. It doesn't tell me who's securing it. It doesn't tell me how it's being secured. They're not saying, you know, this is proof of work and it's based on Adam Back's hash cash. They're not actually using any citations of any kind. They're just saying, it's like me saying, I've invented a time machine. Yeah, it's like a box and you walk in it and it takes you into the future and you can go back in time and it's great. So that's brilliant. Shall I file that? I don't have the technology to make it work, but I know what the user experience will be.
I guess, man. I mean, that's how. If you look at some of like Apple's patents that they've been able to secure for iOS, they're pretty much the same thing, right? I moved my finger across the screen and something happened. Patent.
So what they're trying to claim is user experience. They're trying to own experiences. They're saying this is how it will work, and now we reserve the right to own that.
I guess it's a good thing their patent got denied, right?
Well, of course it got denied. What idiot's going to pass this unless they're being paid off?
There's some crazy patents that people end up getting, man. I don't know. I could believe it sometime eventually getting through. Maybe it will once Bitcoin starts to hurt the federal government a little bit more.
Well, I'd love to know what everyone thinks at home. Bottom left-hand corner, Q&A, because I'm just going through this brief description of the drawing, and then it kind of gives, you know, this figure 1 illustrates the prior art method of internet payment processing using debit and credit cards, depicts the first embodiment of the present invention that enables internet shopping. No, it doesn't. It's basically a flow chart that says you've got a browser, you've got a thin wallet, and you can then move funds. It doesn't say who's authorizing the funds. It doesn't say where the money's coming from. It doesn't describe. One of the beautiful, most elegant things about a blockchain is that the price of fraud protection is baked in by design. You know how much it costs to prevent fraud. It's that the sum total of the costs going into electrifying the miners that are securing the network. That is the sum total need for fraud, because what Satoshi has done in a way is she's come up with a diversionary tactic. She said, okay, what can you always rely on parasites to do? You can always rely that they will put in the least amount of effort for the maximum amount of reward, right? So what you do is you give them something to do. You get them busy. You give them somewhere to go so they don't be deleterious of other people. Let them go chase the hashing rate, right? The hash rate is actually rather arbitrary. I mean, it's basically a function. What it does is it really just describes to us how much of a chance and the appetite for risk that people have. That they want to kind of leave this thing going, or buy a miner, they want to leave it going, and then they want to go off and do other things whilst that makes them a passive income. That's what you're tapping into. So
maybe they left it open. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Theo. No, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to say, you know, they didn't say who approves the transaction and who, and a few other things. Maybe they left it open because, yeah, they weren't sure if it's going to be them or if this is going to be built for the government to just approve transactions directly. Or maybe they just were, you know, just so kind of closed-minded in their own world that they thought, well, of course, we are the ones that, you know, authorize the transactions. We don't even need to put that in there. Of course, it's a centralized system, and we don't need to even say that in the paper, and it displays it in the paper that they don't even have a concept of, you know, anyone else except themselves or a real central being, you know, approving the transactions and controlling the ledger, because it doesn't say anything otherwise. So either they didn't think about it or they wanted to leave it open to that it could be any bank. Yeah.
Well, I was curious because this obviously comes a while after Bitcoin is published. Just mute yourself there, Theo, because we can hear me back.
I'm doing it. I'm sorry.
No worries. Yeah, they don't actually mention Bitcoin anywhere, which is really weird because this has come in 5 years after Bitcoin has been around. They allude to prior art, but they don't mention or credit, like Satoshi credits other people. He credits Ralph Merkle with the Merkle tree. He didn't invent that. He credits Adam Back. There's a real humility to Satoshi's ingenious, where all she's really done is she's looked at the canon, the cryptographic canon of the last 20, 30 years, and she's just hand-picked out a lot of goodies and then just arranged them into a certain order and say, look at what this gives rise to. Look at what emerges when you put all these existing tools into a certain order and an arrangement.
They did a great job, and I think that's part of the reason why they kept their like anonymity, right? Like, it's easier to maybe offload some of this responsibility to these other people, and you can just dip out, whereas like JP Morgan's not going to disappear.
Yeah, and I think what it ends up doing is, because you've got everyone's transactions in, let me just yeah, just mute yourself, yeah.
Okay, every time I do it, it does that. Sorry.
No worries. What the blockchain enables is it enables everyone to be the police. This is by the long way around. I've taken a very scenic route, but this is what I wanted to relay it back to. Everyone has the ability to be a police officer now. And we've recently had quite a few posts on Bitcoin Talk and on Reddit, which I'll feature in another show because I've got a format that I've got lined up, where people keep reminding members of the community, like, I wonder what Mark Karpellis is doing today, or I wonder what Danny from NeoMB is doing. And sort of this just gently reminding people, don't let these guys get away with it, because if you know, justice is about doing the right thing even when everyone else is saying no, and even if the power, like that police officer in that picture that we started with isn't the police officer anymore, right? He's actually occupying a territory by force. And you've got the ability to see justice, but you've got to do it even though you run the risk of being killed, haven't you? Because that's what justice needs. Everyone should be going around trying to seek justice. Who wants to come in?
Sorry, yeah, I agree with you on that. I believe everybody should be able to seek their own justice and not have to rely on others to define it for them or to actualize it in the real world. That's a really important part of freedom, I would say, is finding your own justice.
Yeah, I agree, of course. Maybe now, with all of the Litecoin hysteria and everything, maybe it's a good time for JP Morgan to launch their own altcoin with their patent, and you know, to take up that market, you know, by centralized force. What do you guys think?
Well, so this is interesting, right? Because we recently, in the last few days, we've seen Litecoin's value plummet back to the pre-hype hysteria that was put forward by Max Kaiser back in November, I think. Yeah, the 18th of November. And one of the interesting things here is that when you read these kind of posts, let me just read this guy out. So the title is, "All this fear, despair on a 15% drop with no news tells me one thing." You can tell it's going to be good, right? "Nothing has changed fundamentally, yet the fear and weak hands are being shaken out. You can't buy cheap if you don't buy low when everyone else is panicking. Once LTC rebounds, many of the same people who are scared right now are going to be going all in at $9+ instead of taking advantage of current prices. And to put my money where my mouth is, here is an upload of my most recent buy on OKCoin for a little over 34,000 LTC. See you at the top, gentlemen." And what you notice with this kind of rhetoric is they are basically ascribing value to price and pretty much nothing else. They're not talking about needs. They're not talking about usability. They're not trying to understand first and then try to communicate their thoughts. They're just talking about their own needs. And the problem with being selfish and short-termist like this is there's nearly always someone better than you at it. Right? The smart money in this, if you're going to play this game, and I'm not necessarily taking a moral position telling people whether they should be on trading exchanges or not, I'm just warning you that if you do take this extremely short-termist perspective on an outlook and you treat the whole thing like a casino, there will be somebody smarter than you who will deprive you of the ability to end up with more than you started with. The smart money in this game is running an exchange. An exchange cannot trade on their own platform without risk, because as soon as they start approaching net zero income, they just close the exchange down, and then they take people's money. And then they go, if you're lucky, they'll go through bankruptcy proceedings like Gox's. But if you're unlucky, they just run off with your money, because it's not their money they were ever trading with in the first place. Theo, I wanted to talk to you about this 34, what was it, this big drop. There was a massive market order the other day on BTCE and Litecoin. Did you see it?
Yeah, I think, well, the guy on the post on the Reddit post, yeah, he posted, I saw the drop, yeah, on the chart. On Reddit, I said 34,000 order. I guess it was a market order. I mean, it doesn't really matter, even if it's a limit or a market. It's just like what I said on Twitter. Who in there? But you also said, I said that's a horrible trading strategy. He said, yeah, it's not a trading strategy. It's manipulation. Well, I mean, yeah, sure, go hand in hand sometimes. But I think who's going to really put that much into Litecoin when it's falling with this? I mean, it doesn't make any logical sense from a trading perspective. It makes no sense because there's no bottom. If I don't look at, if I just want to play the trading game, I just want to look at the charts. There's no bottom. There's no confirmed bottom. So it doesn't make any sense to put a gigantic order like that. So it doesn't. So whoever's doing this is just a complete idiot, or it's like you said, it's an exchange, and or it's a combination that I think on OKCoin and I know on Bitfinex and on BTC also, I think some accounts and a few others, you can start doing margin trading. So what that means is that if I have 10 Bitcoins on my account, they'll let me trade. They'll basically loan me out double, so 1 to 2. And let me trade, and if I make plus, then I'm able to pay them back. And if I get really close to where I'm not going to be able to pay them, and there's a so-called margin call where my account, basically they take the funds because they see that I'm not going to be able to pay them back. So it's just like a double-up bet. But what the problem is that when this gets really big and the exchanges get involved and they place their own bets and there's all this margin stuff, you know, it's kind of like a cat's cradle. Everything gets twisted all into another, and it makes it much easier for an exchange to have problems. You know what I mean? And I think that's a real big danger. And because, I mean, people just, like I said, I'm not going to take a moral position on trading. I don't have a problem with trading per se, but people just need to be aware that right now all of the base risk red lights should be blinking. You know, you should be in DEFCON 5, because who knows? I don't know if an exchange is going to close or not. I don't have any evidence. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that when there are really, really big props, that can also affect exchanges' liquidity, and you need to be aware of that when you're putting a lot of funds on exchanges.
Right. Because the thing is that you wouldn't put a 34,000 market order on an exchange unless you knew someone there, right? Like you're not.
You wouldn't do it on an exchange like BTCE without knowing somebody there, unless you have more money than you know what to do with. But I mean, maybe one of the other exchanges where you actually know who runs it, you might.
Well, there's a school who knows who runs BTC. I mean, to be honest, it's not, you know, I don't know if you have to pay or if it's just the people that run it, or if you guys want to comment and question and answer, go ahead, BTCE people. I'm not against you. I'm just saying that, I mean, there's definitely an inside crew, and they know who runs it, and they're comfortable. Maybe they're comfortable putting so much on, or maybe they get some kind of benefits, or maybe they're allowed to front run. I don't know. I don't have any evidence of front running orders, but I wouldn't be surprised if guys with a lot of funds that are in the inside circle get to have some benefits, and if that has something to do with the price downturn, I don't know. I think another aspect of it's there's also a mining aspect that I think we need to touch on with Litecoin, because when what happened was Max Kaiser set that price point that you posted of 50, and it got almost to 50, got like what 48, 49 I think on BTC then, and basically as soon as it got that high, then people that were thinking about script ASICs were like, okay, we'll do it now. Now it's doable because the price has reached a point where profitability is possible to make back, and people will actually buy these machines because they're going to be mining something that has a high price. So I think at the point where it got around 40 or whatever, all the guys that thought about making script ASICs were like, okay, let's do it. We got to design it. And by the time they came out, the price was already down to 20 or whatever it was. And yeah, and they'll make their money back to buy the next miner. And I think perhaps people are dumping, and that's what it's one of the troll bucks. That's what they're saying in the troll box. But this is 3 mining groups, and they're dumping all the Litecoin to get their to buy generation script ASICs or whatever. I'm sure that's part of it, but I think that's also a little bit of a gamble if you're going to make your profitability back with miners.
Yeah, you're breaking up pretty badly there, Theo. So maybe you could try reconnecting, because actually you're saying a lot of really good stuff. Let me go through it.
Have you seen the volume for Litecoin right now? It's huge. It's like more than almost all the other coins combined. It's like to me that's a good sign for Litecoin. Like even though the price is down, whatever, the volume is like millions and millions and millions of dollars right now. You know, they're transacting a fourth of what the Bitcoin is in terms of actual dollar value in volume. So while there's these huge dumps going on, if you look at like the other cryptocurrencies, there's dumps. Tons and tons of coins have been collapsing over the last couple days. Like what is it? Namecoin down 15% in the last 24 hours. Purecoin down 16% in the last 24 hours. You're like, geez, Monacoin almost 50% in the last 24 hours. Zetacoin 30-something%. Like, wow. And these are tiny, tiny volumes, tiny in comparison to what Litecoin is and Bitcoin are doing right now.
People's time horizons came up, right? People had expectations of returns, and those expectations weren't met, and so they sold, because the only reason they were really holding these coins was because they wanted more Bitcoin.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I'm just saying the amount of volume going on, to me that's a good indicator that there's still life left in the system. You know what I mean? Like when I see a coin, if you look at these top 10 coins and you want to sort them by volume, the next highest coin is Stellar at $300,000 of volume.
Well, that's just like a...
Exactly, and that's a recent coin that has already fallen back down to like its launch value or something like that. Like,
and what about these names? What about these names like Stellar? Doesn't that like reek and like going to the moon and, you know, all this kind of Dogecoin stuff where they were like, we're doing this for altruism, but then they've got all these motifs in their artwork that depicts dogs in spaceships and in spacesuits going to the moon. It's like it's doublespeak. You're trying to say two things. Well, it's not really what he meant by doublespeak, sorry, but they're trying to have their cake and eat it. They want to say two things at the same time. And you've kind of got this schizophrenia going on. And like Richard Bowes says, Richard Bowes, a friend of mine in London, he recently did an interview with Stephanie Murphy on Let's Talk Bitcoin, where he was talking about the challenges that he faced trying to take Bitcoin to Kenya. And this motif kept coming up over and over again in the interview about the Bitcoin as an investment and how, you know, these people, these poor people, in his words, could make a lot of money if they just held onto the coins. But what about just doing what's right in the present? What about me just, you know, acting according to my needs now rather than constantly trying to hang on to promises? Is our whole economy not just based on promises? These future narratives that we cling on to don't exist.
Yeah.
Hello.
And another thing I'd like to say that I don't really endorse Stellar. I don't like Jed McCaleb products. I think everybody should avoid it. I know he's got, you know, backers like Square or whatever behind it, but that was the same thing we heard with Ripple, and Stellar is a Ripple fork. Like, what the? I guess Ripple's made it now, right? Ripple has now hit the big time. They've had their own shitcoin spun off of it.
So we've got a question by Daniel O'Prey, who says, talking of scam exchanges, what's your take on HitBTC? They claim to have raised 8 million, don't specify from whom, and don't name a single team member. Seems quite professionally made, though. Do you guys know anything about it?
I can't say I do. I can't say I know anything about HitBTC, but I'm not sure a professional-looking website is enough to nowadays convince me that they're worthy of my attention. I mean, you can go take a day class and throw up a website that probably looks something similar.
Yeah, I would be really cautious about that, you know. I mean, yeah, just use your own due diligence. I mean, if you really want to trade there, then just send a real small amount there and see if you're able to withdraw. I mean, that's one quick test. It doesn't mean anything for sure, but I mean, that could be the first test.
Well, they're on. What I would say is that the signals that are used in this market as signals of quality are often things like user interface. And I'm actually trying to schedule an interview with Sexio, the controversial, you know, gigahash.io founders. And what's happening now is they've got me in an exchange with their chief information officer, right? This is interesting, no? I'm now in communication with their chief information officer, not a developer, not someone working on the code, but someone in charge of the messaging. This is all about your ability to control information, because as I've said before, if you control the information, you control beliefs, and beliefs are what give rise to actions and prices. So what you see is that people that have now got very good in this industry of creating good front ends and nice little graphics and maybe running a good social media campaign can say things like HitBTC does on their about page here, where they talk about the mission statement and they say these investments and our all-star team of developers, you know, but they don't say who they are. A bit like JP Morgan. They don't really go into any details. They just expect you to believe them, because it's a nice looking website, and surely someone who's got this kind of class and style doesn't go around scamming people, right?
4 out of 5 doctors recommend Camel cigarettes over the competition.
Right. Theo, are you back? How's your internet doing?
Yeah, I'm back now. I think my internet is better. I had to go down one floor. I think the Wi-Fi is better. Sorry. Yeah, so yeah, I definitely wouldn't. I think that how a website looks is not necessarily a trust symbol, and to be honest, I give more trust to websites that don't look perfect, because it's a little bit more authentic sometimes. It depends on what it is, but if it's too shiny and too clean, sometimes I'm more suspicious of that than one that looks slightly rough around the edges. I mean, it doesn't have to look ugly, but I definitely wouldn't trust, I wouldn't use how a website looks. And yeah, I think that before I broke up, we were basically talking that someone mentioned that a lot of the other alts are also crashing, and what was it, Namecoin down 10, 15, 20%, Purecoin down 10, 15, 20%, etc. Well, I mean, you know, let's be honest, not only is Bitcoin, but Litecoin was the altcoin that everyone saw went to 50. And then everyone thought, okay, if Litecoin can do it, then maybe one of the other coins can do it, you know? And a lot of things in the alt world are measured to Litecoin. Hell, there even are Litecoin markets where people trade altcoins for Litecoin instead of altcoins for Bitcoin. So Litecoin is really important for the alt market. I wonder how many of these markets are going to be closed now that Litecoin is so low that they're going to be even more meaningless. Because if I'm worth 1 Latoshi, which is a made-up word that people use for a Satoshi in Litecoin, now I'm worth much less. If I'm an altcoin that's only traded in Litecoin, it's going to be really a dismal day for me as far as the price goes. And a lot of people are talking about that. I think that if you look at this, though, in the real big picture, maybe the price of Litecoin will go up again. Who knows? Nobody knows. Nobody knows the bottom. Maybe this was the great altcoin bubble of 2013, 2014. We don't know. Nobody knows right now. But I mean, I think Bitcoin in the early days also had some big ups and downs. But the difference is that I think the people that were buying and selling it, the speculation wasn't as big as it is now. It's nothing to compare, and the volume is nothing as it is now. So it's kind of hard to compare it. Some people are saying, yeah, okay, Bitcoin had really big price crashes in the past, and that's okay if Litecoin does because it's a similar thing. But I think that it's a little bit difficult to do that comparison just from a simple chartism point of view if you just look at the volume and a few other factors. So I don't think that that's necessarily an argument that Litecoin will go back up. But yeah, what is the Litecoin community doing? That's what I ask myself a lot of times.
Theo,
I don't really know.
Anything.
I have no idea. You know, I guess that the developer. Yeah, I mean, you hear Lee, the developer, he talks sometimes, and he has some interesting things to say, and you know, he'll explain his ideas when he made the code and so on. But I don't really notice much going on. Okay, I can't say that I'm really involved in it, so it's but totally a subjective point of view. But I mean, I don't see anything amazing, or I'm not sure what they're doing. I have no idea. I haven't heard a whole lot. I mean, okay, I guess that you could pay with Litecoin at a few places, but I don't know really if it's a lot more necessarily. Litecoin is faster than Bitcoin with transactions. What's the other advantage? I don't know. You can mine it with script. Oh, now they have script ASIC. I don't know. What's the advantage? I'm not sure.
You know, it's one of the things, Theo, that you said is funny is a coworker of mine was like, you know, I think he has some Bitcoin. He's like, yeah, I think I want to get some Dogecoin because I want to send around smaller amounts. He did not know ChangeTip existed. I showed him ChangeTip, and he was like, oh, I'm not going to get Dogecoin now. I was like, whoa, like that was a really easy thing for me to convince him. I didn't even like try to convince him not to use Dogecoin. I was just trying to show him, oh, I can send you, you know, a couple cents over Twitter or Facebook or whatever, you know, like it's really easy. Just use this service. It's not a big deal.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. I totally can see that point of view. I mean, you know, about small amounts. I mean, but in the future, and now even, I think it is important to have completely independent blockchains that are totally separate from Bitcoin. That's a real important thing to have, you know, independent blockchains because we don't know what's going to happen, and you never know. There's so many things that could happen. So I think that the merit of altcoins is definitely there without question.
I agree. It was just something that actually happened on Monday that I thought was quite funny. You know, like he was telling me, I was like, you didn't know you can do this. You didn't know you could send somebody a quarter really easily without a fee if you just use a service layer on top of Bitcoin.
Right. So I think that what you have there is the post where it's showing some of the really early altcoins. You got IXCoin.
Yeah. So this is a great website right here, mapofcoins.com. I don't know the guys behind it, but it'd be good to talk to them at some point because they've done a really good job of giving us a timeline. So we start with Bitcoin, and then we had Namecoin, and then we had IXCoin, and we had Solidcoin, and we started to get our first forks around August, September 2011. This was before my time. I think I was first becoming aware of Bitcoin at this point, but only peripherally. And then what we get in October 2011 is this announcement by Cobley, by Charles Lee, who, it's October 2011, where he notices that a lot of these coins, a lot of these projects like IXCoin, Solidcoin, Tenebricks, Fairbricks, which was a much more recent, I think that was, Fairbricks may have been Charles Lee as well, from what I remember, and they just didn't survive because the energy levels of the founders started to wane, and you know there wasn't really much of a community. So he wanted to bring an alternative to Bitcoin, and the differentiator he's going to introduce is the script algorithm. So he says proof of work. We really liked Tenebrix's script proof of work. Using scripts allows one to mine Litecoin while also mining Bitcoin. We humbly offer a big thanks and to Artsfalls. And one of these interesting things is that this is essentially a way for people to maximize their profitability by mining, 2 times at the same time. But also these script coins later on, as they started to develop, gave miners a way to ROI on that old mining equipment that was no longer working on Bitcoin, right? Because as Bitcoin's difficulty went up, what you had is divisibility by diversification. Right, and as these new coins kind of came out, and you can see them sort of starting to proliferate, although none of these are very popular at this point, we don't actually start to reach popularity, we don't start to break out until Feathercoin comes along. Now Feathercoin was the one that I was involved with very early on, because what we did was we made it about the people, and we were like, yeah, let's rally around this thing and try to get this working for a niche group of people. It was very focused. I was tweeting out from Oxford and London, and photographing pictures of real people, which is what audiences wanted to see. And I thought, perhaps in my naivety, I've yet to be vindicated for this, but I thought, look, this is really about people. It's not about money. It's not money people want. It's each other. So if we tell a story about the people that are using this on the ground, because I was seeing a real disconnect between the Bitcoin talk forum and the trolling and the cesspit, the wanton greed of the place, and then the actual real life. When you went to the meetups, you just found some people who were like, oh, this is really cool, this technology could be, it was like a mind virus, this blockchain technology. So I don't know, it may well be that these altcoins are just not right now. It may be that they are just too early, that eventually, yes, there will be a proliferation of blockchains, but especially if we venture off into space and we want this communication to travel, you're going to need overlapping currencies, overlapping blockchains, because you've got a latency problem with proof of work. But at the moment, I think the problem is that if Bitcoin doesn't survive, none of them survive. And I think more people, myself included, are now persuaded that if we don't put our weight behind Bitcoin first, none of these coins are going to stand a chance.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree with that. I definitely think that a lot of these altcoins aren't going to be around in a couple of years. I think there will. I don't think altcoins are disappearing, like you said. I think there's always going to be a necessity for competing currencies. I just think that's the future we're moving to. That there's always just going to be competition in that realm. But they're going to need to bring more than they already have. That maybe that's where the 2.0 coins are going to come in and take over and push these older, I don't want to say knockoffs, but these older altcoins or altchains out of the market.
I mean, look at this in the big perspective. This is all. Most of these are, or not most. Litecoin is not, but a lot of the others are. I guess I would put in the Dogecoin wave. So that was kind of a wave of altcoins that happened. Before Dogecoin, I don't know for sure, but I guess you had one new altcoin a week or something like that. But or even that. But after Dogecoin, you had new coins daily or 10 a day or I don't know how many a day. So, and I think that's going to definitely, maybe we've already seen it, I don't know, but that's going to probably end. And I think that, yeah, everyone is putting the, I'm not sure, what was it, in the cart before the horse, or the horse before the cart, or
yeah, the cart before the horse, yeah.
Exactly. That's the whole thing. That's the message. Everyone is doing that. You got to have, why do we need this besides a speculation tool? You got to have some kind of reason or some kind of use. Why do you need to have that? Well, for value, because otherwise your price is, with no value, your price is going to be really short-lived. And if you don't understand what value is, well, this is a good learning by doing example. I guess the altcoin, world, perhaps. But I mean, I think people need to learn about that. You know what I mean? This goes into a lot of other things. We need to talk to each other about what value is. We need to talk to each other about how money is generated currently and what's the difference, and a lot of other things. And if you don't understand money is generated now and what value is outside of the altcoin world, then it's going to be difficult, in my opinion, to have a long-term value, or impossible maybe to have long-term value created inside of that realm, because it doesn't really make any sense.
There's let's bring in something helpful. Perhaps what will help is defining market. A market, as it says in the Clue Train Manifesto, markets are conversations. Markets are places where people use one another as a reference for price. You don't necessarily need to be an actual buyer and seller in a market in order to take part in a market, because just by being there and just by expressing an opinion about something, you are having some influential factor in the market's outcome. This is what really gets to me. It's stuff like this where you get these kind of what I call circle jerks on Reddit, where people get together. My friend Larissa, I was speaking to her last night. Histories of Things to Come is the name of her blog. I'll link it below later on. And she was talking about how these altcoins are like branded dreams. Right, that people get together because profit is a function of asymmetry of wealth. Because if everyone profits at the same time, you see, nobody really profits. Right, it's the same as saying no one does. So what you need to do is you need to enter into a pact. And it doesn't have to be an explicit, it doesn't have to be overt, but you need to get together with a small group of people and you all agree that, you know, I'm going to go off and make the t-shirts, you're going to go off onto that forum and, you know, get some of the energy going and get them talking about, I'm going to upvote this for you and I'm going to upvote that on that subreddit. And this is what gets to me, is that you then get sort of, well, I'm reading this as disingenuous, you tell me what you think. So here's a guy, Grouchy Shibe, and by the way, the whole use of the word Shibe gets to me as well, but that's another issue. He says that Bitcoin is the one, that's the top one, but the reason why Dogecoin is second is because it has the highest proportion of users who will promote it for altruistic reasons. Really? Seriously? Like, how naive do you have to be? Let's get real. Nobody's here simply because they're trying to be altruistic. No one goes to these cryptocurrency forums because they're trying to be, you know, generous and giving back. They're here because they want to sell for more than they bought for. And if, by the way, they can have some social impact, and if, by the way, they can take part in something that's bigger than them, well, then that's great. But that's not the explicit reason why they're there. And to say otherwise, I think, is just completely disingenuous, and you're just perpetuating the lie even further, no? Or am I being too harsh, guys?
No, I think you're right on. I don't think altruism really exists. I think altruism is something that the elites created as a way to, you know, convince the poor that, you know, good things could happen if you just try to do good things. Let's be honest, you profit from changing the world in the way you want it to be, right? Like, if I want everybody to be happy, that's probably because it's going to make me happy. It's probably going to be better for me to live in a world where everybody can eat and feed themselves and be sheltered than it is a world where people have to fight for shelter and food. So yeah, there's no, they're fooling themselves. They're trying to do some marketing and they're trying to, you know, keep the morale up, even though it looks like, you know, maybe their coin is going to start coming under attack again.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, some of the, or a lot of the talk, like what you're describing, it reminds me a lot of someone like Frank Kern. Have you ever heard of Frank Kern?
No.
Okay, so if you can just look him up. So he's basically, you know, probably the so-called affiliate marketing guru. You know, he basically, and it's funny because he doesn't really sell anything except his own, you know, how-tos, how to market stuff. So yeah, and it's all about creating these inside group team A and team B and team C, more or less. That's a lot about what it goes down to. And I mean, and if you have to appeal in some of your marketing that you're doing it for the greater good or altruism or whatever you want to call it, that could be part of it. But the main thing is a lot of these so-called circle jerks are repeating that same pattern where they have, you know, and the main thing is that, yeah, they try to make it so that people hear about the coin from a lot of different people, but the people have already bound themselves together to tell the people behind their backs. It's like if you hear something, if I tell you that coin A is good, then you might think, okay, well, Theo said coin A is good. That's interesting. But if you see that, but if person C tells you that, and person D tells you that, and person E tells you that, and it's on different social networks, and it's different ads, and it's retargeting and all that, then maybe you buy. You make the buy action. That's what it's all about. You buy into that altcoin, and that's what they're trying to generate a lot of times in these so-called circle jerks. It's about making these circles of interaction. You want to surround the buyer with like 3 circles of this, and they're getting bombarded with these messages that they're supposed to buy the coin for whatever reason. And it's probably not having to do with real value.
This is something called
Does
the
that make
attention.
sense?
Yeah, absolutely it does. It makes total sense, and it still comes from the same fundamental underlying belief that I have to have control. And this is something called attention economy, and this idea has been around for quite a while, where because we all have discretionary attention, we can only pay attention to one thing at a time. It's advantageous, therefore, to control the information in the environment. And this is some of the things that Kevin Kelly has listed as being objects in this worldview, where you get this sort of immediacy, where as the controller of information, you can define the emergency. You can say what is the priority, what should you be doing next. If you wake up every morning to your Twitter feed or Facebook, if that's your reflex, then you are vulnerable, because they are controlling the flow of that information. They control what is immediate and what is priority. The personalization, this information is tailored to you. Have I got that link up? Yes. So here's one of the things that was come up on Reddcoin, where it's like, let's get more women into Reddcoin. And I'm not saying that this is necessarily a bad idea. I think we need more diversification of a more diverse user base in cryptocurrency in general. But this is about locking in an advantage to our group and our community. The reason people call each other things like shive is that it's what's called an in-group signal. You're saying we know each other, we're from here, because we do things like call each other the name of a bloody Japanese dog, right? That's what we do around here. It's a shibboleth. It's a secret message that tells us that we're kin. And then you get this sort of interpretation, support and guidance. You get authenticity. How can we be sure that this is the right thing? Well, it turns out people are often very good at noticing authenticity, and I dare say that our core ability to know when we're being lied to is one of the reasons why these altcoins don't seem to have had any real staying power. It's partly, I think, because the exchanges undoubtedly control the price by putting buy and sell walls either side, as we started off this discussion describing. But it's also because no one likes to be sold. Like, why are you telling me about this Dogecoin? Or as a woman, why should someone, adopt Reddcoin? What, just because you went on a marketing effort? I can see your Reddit post. I can see this as a conspiracy. I can see you put a lot of work in to try and get my attention. But what I really want to know is, are you acting in my interests, or are you acting in your own? Accessibility, wherever, whenever.
I find it funny, Chris, just to interject. Isn't that something that happened in like Bitcoin a year ago or so? We need to get more women into Bitcoin.
Yeah, well, they're totally missing the point, because it's not about whether or not women are involved.
Well,
it's the question of increasing the diversity.
Yeah, but it just seems like they're trying to play from the same playbook.
Yeah, I think there's a sense, though, that Bitcoin is slightly different to these altcoins, in as much as, because it has the network effect, and because it came first, and also because of its founder. Let's face it, that this was a guy who was clearly reacting to something important. There was a need, and that she had then satisfied that need, and to then go on and just duplicate the code without contributing anything back to the wider industry. But the problem with these altcoins, I think, is the perception that they're not adding anything. Technologically, they're not innovating, and the assumption there is, of course, that innovation is what we need. Now, when we started Feathercoin, we deliberately didn't put innovation into the coin because we wanted to respond to whatever challenges as they arose. As Bush and I saw it, I think particularly more Bush than me, was like, well, if you start changing things, those things become novelty, and then you end up failing on the basis of a novelty. because people realize that, you know, it's no big deal anyway. And in any case, whoever said that they wanted their money to be innovative? You know, people want your money to be secure. They want to know that there's a good steward behind the wheel that's going to always turn up, right? And so it just seems to me that regular people are just trying to be, the serfs are trying to be the dictator. They're trying to now control the information, because we've all got this ability to set up accounts, set up personalities on the internet. We can go create, you know, an account on Reddit, and then we can invest in that, you know, reputation network, and then we can go off and do other things in a different world with a different group of friends. And I wonder whether or not this doesn't just go back to the control mentality.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it does come down to the control mentality, right? They're trying to see some sort of central control even in a decentralized system that they themselves have created, which is kind of funny. Maybe that's where a lot of these are going to fail, is because they have done that. They have tried to create a centralized entity inside a decentralized ecosystem.
And we also have to remember that actually Bitcoin itself is down actually quite heavily today, price-wise. We don't usually talk about the price on this show, but if it's newsworthy and if it's relevant to what's going on, that's quite a big drop.
But volume is up. Volume is way up, way up. If you look over like the last couple, like let's just go the last month. I think the highest it reached was half of what today's volume is.
Well, you can see it on here. I've got my cursor over the volume chart down at the bottom of the screen. I mean, that's...
Yes. So we haven't seen volume like this since early July, late June.
Yeah.
That's pretty significant. I think if the price keeps coming down and volume keeps coming up, we might see a rally. Because that's, if you look at other rallies, that seems to be the like indicator that a rally is coming.
Well, it's broken through these previous support areas. Not that I believe in chartism or anything like that. We often have a go at it on this show, but what you have to understand is that this is information just like everything else. So we're not saying that chartism is always wrong. We're just saying if all you're doing is staring at a screen all day, you're not actually taking part in the wider context. And ultimately, it's the wider context which will determine it. And another thing that a lot of people forget is that for every seller, there has to be a buyer. A market reflects a fair price in the sense that every trade is an honest trade. So just because the price is going down, all that means is that someone already put a prior buy order in place, already expressed their intention to buy, and what this is now recording is that someone has agreed with them and sold into that buy order. That's all it is. It's just the sequence. So there are people currently buying at $536, which is, you know, significantly lower than the 595, whatever. That's quite a big drop in percentage terms.
Yeah. Well, getting into chartism, since we're talking about it, 530, around 530 is a really important support level. If you look at the day or the 3-day candles or whatever, it took a while to break that when it was really low this year. When it was in the 400s this year, it took a while to break 500 and then to break 530. There was quite a lot of resistance. So now we're coming on the other side of that, the top side, where that's a retractment level of 530, and that's a pretty important level. I haven't really taken time to look at the chart, but I mean the thing is with chartism is that like we're doing now a little bit, you have to look at not only the candles, but you have to look at the volume, you have to look at all the information that is available to you, order book, and all that. That all to me goes together with chartism, not just drawing triangles. And if you do that, then you can get, I mean, nobody can predict the future. You have to, but you could maybe predict a trend. That's the whole idea. Is it going to be generally going to go down? Is it likelihood that it's going to keep going down, or the likelihood that it's not going to keep going down? And as long as you take that with a grain of salt, then you're fine. If you go all in because you saw a hammer candle, or a star, or a falling star, or whatever you want to call those, you know, these candles. There's a system where the candles have names. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but there's like a hammer, and there's a star, and there's all kinds of stuff. And you can't take too much into that. That's one way to look at it. But as long as you just take that with a grain of salt and say, okay, well, that is one aspect, and that's another aspect, and you add it all together, and then you want to make a decision, then it's okay. But you can see right now the 530 area is a disputed area right now. We're going to see. So if it really goes significantly lower than 530, then it might go a lot lower. And if it can kind of level out around 530, then that could be what Nick was talking about. That usually when you see high volumes like that, and there's a support level. So if the support level, let's say the support level is 530, then there could be a rally. But nobody can predict the future. Maybe Bitcoin will do like Altcoin and everyone will dump it. We don't know.
And another thing to pay attention to is, of course, the order book. And this is what this chart represents. This is the number of buy orders, right? So a total of 3,247 Bitcoin can be bought for 1.7 million USD. This is on Bitstamp. And when people refer to walls, you may hear this term come up quite a lot. If there's a big buy wall, it means someone has placed a large buy order on the order book, and these graphs here will actually display that for you and give you a graphical representation. Now, the implication is, like here, there's a little. That's not really a wall, but they're normally bigger than this. But this would be described as a sell wall because you can see there's a large vertical incline there, and that signals that it doesn't have to be one person. It could just be a psychological price point that this 0.557 millibits is just a psychological price that people have gravitated towards, and lots of people have put a buy order in one go. The implication is that it would take a lot of momentum and take a lot of volume to move the price beyond that point. However, people often, particularly large whales, people with lots of money on the exchanges, and as we've said earlier, possibly even the exchange themselves, will have been known to pull their buy orders and their sell orders. So just because it looks like, here you see quite steep support for Bitcoin, right? Which would imply lots of people are kind of bullish. Even though the price is going down, the order book seems to suggest that the market is overall expressing a bullish sentiment because we have a steep amount on the buy side. Lots of people have got buy orders hoping that it will go down. And think about it this way. Nobody goes shopping looking to be ripped off, right? When you go out shopping, what you're looking for is a bargain, and you like to think that you've got a bargain. And this is what we're not necessarily in a bullish market yet, unless the number of sellers outweighs the buyers, or unless these buyers withdraw their buy orders at the last moment. On Bitcoin Wisdom, you get the same chart, but it's on the right-hand side at any interval less than 30 minutes. So 30 minutes, you can see you've got the sell orders in the green and the buy orders in the red.
You're not always looking for a bargain if you're Brock Pierce, right? Didn't he say he likes to overpay for things?
Is he insane or something? Or what's the context? Why does he want to overpay?
I'm pretty sure he said that at one of those VC things a couple months ago when somebody was asking him his strategy for investing in Bitcoin businesses, and he was like, "I like to overpay." I swear he said that.
Oh, that is bizarre. I can't explain it. That's really irrational. So, any other points I wanted to talk about? Finally, I wanted to go into Dark Wallet, but do you guys have anything to say in summary?
No, maybe if he's overpaying, he wants to use it as a tax write-off. I don't know. No, I don't have anything else.
I don't know. I just, when you said that, it just clicked in my head. I remember he said that. I think it was that Coin Summit when where he said that. He said it like really short and sweet. I like to overpay, and then he just kind of like shrugged, and that was like the end of his answer for the guy.
I've got something to sell if he wants to overpay. Just get in touch.
So, I spotted something on our Bitcoin this morning, and Amir Tarki posted in response to, just trying to find his post now, this post on our Bitcoin saying, where has Dark Wallet gone? Because it wasn't there. I think it's back now. And we haven't heard from these guys in a while, and it turns out it's because they've run out of money. And someone made the comparison on here to Ethereum, where Ethereum raises, well, it's actually 10,000 plus, isn't it, or more than that, Bitcoins. But then, a very good product like this is actually already delivering, and something that is actually answering a genuine need in this industry is not getting the funding it requires. Where's the justice?
It seems the small
Yeah.
guys like you and I are the ones who are donating to these projects, and the guys with big money who like to overpay are going in on things that maybe they shouldn't.
Maybe, yeah. Yeah, maybe people, they want to know how can they make money with that, and they just don't see a way. They just don't look at it, in the right perspective. I mean, I haven't donated to Dark Wallet. Maybe I need to. But yeah, I think it's a really good point, and it's a really interesting thing. Maybe Dark Wallet should have made a coin. I don't know, but I didn't see really any annoying marketing from them, so that's good. And I didn't see anything ingenuine from them, so that's good.
This
So
is
that's what they've raised, huh?
Well, the reason, yeah, so this is it looks like they've raised 33. Although I could have sworn they made more than that because they did an Indiegogo campaign. Yeah, I'm sure they did an Indiegogo campaign where I could have sworn I remember them raising like 65 bitcoins or something. But anyway, the point is that the reason I think that Dark Wallet is worthwhile is because it stops people from putting anonymity baked into the protocol. If you start putting anonymity baked into the protocol, like we've seen from other efforts like Dogecoin, etc., which of course did very well. Clearly, that's your market research right there. They did all the market research. They proved that there was demand for people to be able to get some kind of privacy, some kind of space of their own away from the prying eyes of the NSA and governments. And they clearly there is a demand for it, but the reason why this needs to be added on as an application on top of Bitcoin is because if you bake it into the protocol by design, you're just inviting more regulation. Whereas if this is something that is seen to be sitting on top and it's a little bit niche and it's only used by a small group of people, then I think that we're going to have a much easier time with lawmakers and their impotent rage. Nick, you're silenced.
Sorry. I was trying to. I agree with you on that. I guess I'm gonna have to cough up a couple more satoshis to this project if they're really having funding issues. Because don't really use Dark Wallet. I've played around with it, but I support their project and I support what they're trying to do. I've sent just disclosure. I've sent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars to the projects that Cody Wilson has been working on over the years. So I'm a big supporter of these kind of things.
Yeah, I'm just looking at one of the things I want to do. I want to do a shout out as well. If there are any developers out there, I'd really like to do a show. Let me just pull it up on the Bitcoin developer mailing list. I do read the mailing list. I can understand it because I know enough about the technicals and I can read code pretty well. Obviously, I can especially read the commented code. And I really want to do a show where we go through this mailing list because not very many people actually read this. And yet a lot of very important decisions, I think, are discussed on here. I don't necessarily know that the decisions get made on this mailing list, but this is one of the primary ways that the developers of Bitcoin communicate. And one of the reasons why is because recently we've had this notion of a coin join and coin shuffle, these mixing protocols are now knocking on the door of the core developers, which means there will need to be some interaction with Bitcoin core dev. Now, as we've reported before, the Bitcoin Foundation have recently gone through a rebranding exercise. It's all about PR now. It's no longer about journalism. And one of the first things they list on their reasons to buy, right, when you go to the join page, and they're trying to persuade you to part with your money, the top reason they list for their work is that they pay 3 core developers of Bitcoin. In other words, you're buying influence. Whoever pays the piper picks the tune is the underlying current to that message. And what they're selling you is the ability to influence the decisions. Now, I don't know what's going on in the mind of Gavin Andreessen. He has not publicly advertised his Bitcoin address, which I find remarkably ironic, given the fact that he's supposed to be the lead scientist of Bitcoin. He's not giving the public any way of compensating him for his work. He just seems to be happy that he's compensated via this subscription model through the Bitcoin Foundation. And the problem is that no matter how good a person Gavin is, and I have every confidence in him as an individual, I've met him, not fully met him, but I've been in a room with him, I've seen him talking, Yes, I believe that he is a safe pair of hands for this project, that he's not radical, he's not going to do anything too extreme, but also he's not incorruptible. Like any human being, he has flaws. And if he's got these kind of niggling little interests lurking in the background where people that are paying him are expressing some friction, like the way that they go to the regulation in DC, if he starts to get the impression that maybe, maybe Mike Hearn wants a few changes put in so that he can get his lighthouse project off the ground. Maybe he just needs a soft fork or something like this. But then in the back of Gavin's mind, he's thinking, if I do this, I might piss off my paymasters and I'm kind of beholden to them. It's going to start influencing his decision. What we need to do is we need to start keeping these guys honest, and we need to be paying attention to the decisions they're making. And what I'd really like is for a developer, there aren't many out there I know that are really, really good and understand cryptocurrency. I'm learning, and actually with every show that I do, I learn more as well, because I put quite a lot of hours into researching these. So it will help me immensely. It'll help the public very well. We'd also like to do a shout out for anyone willing to transcribe or just put some links down in the YouTube comments as we're doing these shows as well. That would really help, because what we're finding is we're getting new people tune in all the time. I had a really nice email from a guy who's working with one of the sociologists that I ended up citing. Hopefully I can get him on a future show, and he sent me this paper that I'm reading at the moment. That actually it's a sociology paper, but it plays really well into Bitcoin technology. So by tagging these videos, by shining a light on the areas that no one is looking at, by doing the work that nobody else wants to do, we can encourage more people to make educated choices in their lives. And the more education you have, the more power you have, the more independence you have, and the less beholden you need to be to those big power structures, and then the less likely we have of this police state emerging. I mean, what do you think, guys? We need to do a show, don't we? Like a dedicated show. Maybe it's weekly, maybe it's bi-monthly, where we talk about some of the decisions being made in Bitcoin core dev.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea, and like you said before, it needs to be done. And I think I don't know who's really qualified to do it or whatever, but maybe there just needs to be one or two shows done, and maybe then that would attract some more people that are more into coding and more into explaining it in a better way. You know what I mean? Maybe it just needs to do an introduction show, and maybe that show itself would attract a lot of interest, and people can see really exactly what you're talking about. And yeah, I think it's really good, and I think it's also important that I think you mentioned it, that people are reminded that Bitcoin Foundation is not the only way to support the core developers, because I think that's a misconception that people have, and I think that you touched on it with the relaunch of the website, but that was a misconception that I've heard from people in discussions before. One person said, what does the Bitcoin Foundation do? Why do we need to join them? They said, oh, well, they pay the core developers. Well, that's not exactly how it works. Like you said, this guy doesn't even have this guy is somehow siphoned from the Bitcoin Foundation, but it's not as if the Bitcoin Foundation has a monopoly on supporting the core developers or something like that.
Oh, absolutely not. You have people who already work for BitPay and Coinbase, etc. These other entities paying them to participate in, the Bitcoin development. I think that's awesome. I think BitPay has been doing a lot of good work when it comes to the things they've been pushing out.
Right. So we just need to. I think a lot of people just don't realize it. It just isn't out there enough sometimes that is what's going on. That it's not just one organization, like you said, supporting the developers, and that we can support the developers. And what are they doing, and what kind of decisions? What is that you're highlighting right there?
Right, so I wanted to just give a quick an example of where a learning opportunity resides, because one of the tasks, as I said earlier, that Satoshi had when he was coming up with Bitcoin is, how do you get people to agree on a single history? Right, when we've talked about things like Israel and Palestine before, we bring up this notion of a predestined, pre-agreed future, a future narrative that I've decided on already, and now I've got to go through the timeline, I've got to go through the history books and the textbooks, because now it's incumbent on me to tell a story that helps me get to that future. But remember, that futures as imagined become past. Because as I imagine something, my imagining it becomes the past. I now remember myself imagining it. And then we often, I would claim, as people, as humans, we get attached to these histories. We get attached to the history that is yet to come, the past that is yet to be, and we obsess over trying to bring it into the present, and we forget that it doesn't actually exist. In order for it to exist, the existing stateful environment, the law, the physical world, needs to agree that it can happen. It needs to be, but no matter how many times I imagine myself eating a tub of ice cream, right? If I'm 10 miles away from the shop and I haven't got a car, it ain't going to happen, not tonight. So I can obsess over it all I want, or I can just change my mind and move on to something else. And what Satoshi highlighted was that the task at hand was, how do we get everyone to agree on a single history, even though you've got people joining the network and leaving the network? And one of the issues that's coming up on this thread, and this is, I think Mike Hearn is answering Tim here in the mailing list. He says in order for it to happen, at least one other, so in order to get your coins mixed up, there needs to be at least one other peer that agrees on the same world that you do. That, in other words, if someone hijacks your internet connection and you go online on a fake internet connection that someone else is controlling, someone could just lie to you about the statefulness of the blockchain. They could lie to you about all the new blocks whilst you were gone, right? And so what I wanted to do is, this is why I wanted to engage with a developer, because I can understand their concepts with the help of Google. Like, I can read through this mailing list and I can go off and look stuff up that I haven't heard of before. And I can understand it on a philosophical level. I can relate this to regular people by talking about the big picture perspective. But what I can't do a lot of the time is I can't go through the code and actually work out, well, who put that commit in? Why was it put in? What interests should that developer be declaring? What commercial interests should that developer be declaring? Why are they pushing for that? Now, sometimes it's pretty obvious. They actually have it in the footer of the email that they're working on this project, and then you can go look up that website. You can dox the person, find out what documents. What would be really nice is if we could sanitize that as journalists. We do some proper journalism instead of all this PR crap we've been getting. And actually go through, investigate all these people, look at what they're rooting for, and that actually help people at home. And then what I wanted to do was get an army of people that are like, well, smallish, army, an entourage of people who would then comment on the video, put in timestamps where, so-and-so says this, and Nick says this, and Magnus maybe comes in with some of his thoughts. And then we can tag it, and then people can just discover it. And these videos end up being kind of chopped up into little segments, so you can watch this 5-minute bit here where we talk about CoinJoin and the fact that, well, Amir Taki not being given the resources that he needs to do some of the work that he's been doing. So that's what I'm trying to create in a nutshell.
Yeah, sounds good.
So I guess we should have final thoughts, because we've been going quite a long time, and I want to thank everyone, all 20 of you, for sticking around. Imagine, guys, imagine there were 20 people here with us in our rooms. That's what it would be. That would be a good audience, right? That would have a good atmosphere in it. So and this is what it is. It's basically, this technology is lowering the marginal cost of being small. It doesn't matter anymore. It used to be you couldn't have a TV show if you got less than 1 million viewers, because it wasn't worth the network doing it. They had opportunity costs. They could hire that airspace out to a better, bigger, brighter talent,
They gave us a really tall ladder to get over the barriers of entry they've erected around their media.
Yeah, absolutely. So, final thoughts.
Yeah, I think that I fear that Litecoin might fall even down more, might go down more. I don't see any bottom right now. If you look at the chart, I don't see any bottom, and I don't see any reason why the sell-off won't continue. Yeah, I still don't know what the Litecoin community does. And if you're in the Litecoin community, then get in touch, because I want to know what you're doing.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I'd like to just comment that I think if you watch this, let's just send a little bit of money over to Amir Taki and the Unsystem guys. Send them $1. Everybody just go and send them $1 if you can. I think that would go a long way. They'd probably appreciate it.
Yeah, this is their address. And you can, if you don't believe me, I can put the link down below. It's I've got it from here on the Unsystem wiki. This is Amir Taki talking today. Jen Jinx, I think that's how you pronounce his username here, where he says we're under-resourced and we've run out of funds. Now the team is remaining to code and bring community on a volunteer basis. And so, I mean, I would also say that these guys are living in squats, right? So, I mean, I don't know. I haven't been through all of the money that they've spent. I don't know where this has all gone. Maybe it all went on hookers and blow. But I doubt it. I think that they live very, very frugal existences, so that they can make stuff like this. And
yeah, he says right there they want politicized people. They want people who hold the same political views as them. They're not looking for a non-political or politicized version of Bitcoin. They're firmly in the crypto anarchist camp, and that's where they want Bitcoin to stay.
Keep Dark Wallet in your hands, he says. I mean, it's really important, because this is the only other movement we've got outside of the Bitcoin Foundation. Well, obviously that and the speculators, right? We've been talking about the speculators this whole show, but there's another bunch of stakeholders too, and that's these. I would actually describe them as politically moderate. I don't even think they're that extreme in their views. They're just trying to put the power into the hands of the people at the lower strata of society. But here's my final thought. Here's the real problem here, and I'll put the link to this down in the doobly-doo below. For every reporter, there are 4.6 people in public relations. That's your fucking problem right there. It's just about the people that control the information. You've just got to want to give up the control. So thanks very much for tuning in today. It's been very kind of you. You stuck with us throughout. I really appreciate that. You can also donate to this show. I don't ask for it much because I'm terrible at asking for money. If there's anyone out there that wants to help me do that, I'd really appreciate it. But I've also got a Patreon account that I'll be talking about more in the future. You can check that down in the comments below. So thanks very much, and we'll see you again next time.